a quiet corner of an unremarkable town called Maple Ridge, there stood a small auto repair shop named Fix Fast Mechanics. The shop wasn't anything fancy, just a square building with faded blue paint peeling off its walls, surrounded by piles of old tires and rusted car parts. Inside, the air smelled like oil, rubber, and burnt metal. Grease-streaked floors stretched across the workspace, and tools hung neatly on hooks along the walls. Despite its humble appearance, Fix Fast was known far and wide as the place where impossible car problems got solved. People from neighboring towns would drive for hours just to bring their broken-down vehicles here. But even in such a skilled team, there was one person nobody paid much attention to: Bob, the janitor. Bob had been working at Fix Fast for almost 5 years. He was a tall man with broad shoulders, weathered hands, and kind eyes that always seemed lost in thought. His hair was graying at the temples, and he wore the same pair of worn-out overalls every day. To most people, Bob was invisible, a background character whose only job was to sweep the floor, clean up spills, and make sure the garage looked presentable. No one really knew much about him except that he showed up early every morning, worked silently through the day, and left without saying much. Some joked that Bob probably didn't even know how to hold a wrench, let alone fix a car. They teased him constantly, calling him the guy who fixes nothing, or the shadow mechanic. And yet, Bob never complained. He just smiled politely and went back to sweeping. The mechanics at Fix Fast were a talented bunch. There was Jake, the head mechanic, who could diagnose engine trouble faster than anyone else. Then there was Mia, the youngest member of the team, who specialized in electrical systems and could trace wiring issues with pinpoint accuracy. Rounding out the group was Tony, a burly man with decades of experience under his belt, who prided himself on knowing everything about transmissions. Together they made Fix Fast one of the best repair shops around. Customers trusted them completely, and the team took pride in their reputation. But despite their skills, there were times when even they couldn't figure out what was wrong with a car. Those rare occasions frustrated everyone, especially Jake, who hated not being able to solve a problem. One sunny afternoon, a sleek black SUV pulled into the driveway of Fix Fast Mechanics. Out stepped a middle-aged woman wearing expensive sunglasses and a tailored suit. Her name was Mrs. Harper, and she looked extremely upset. "Please," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "you have to help me. This car won't start, and I've already taken it to 3 different places. No one can tell me what's wrong." She explained that the SUV had suddenly shut down while she was driving on the highway 2 days earlier. Since then, no amount of tinkering had managed to get it running again. Jake nodded sympathetically and promised to take a look. For the next few hours, the entire team worked tirelessly on the SUV. Jake checked the engine, Mia inspected the wiring, and Tony examined the transmission. They ran diagnostics, replaced spark plugs, tested the battery, and even cleaned the fuel injectors. Yet no matter what they tried, the car refused to start. Frustration mounted as each attempt ended in failure. By evening, the mechanics were exhausted and defeated. "I don't understand," Jake muttered, rubbing his temples. "Everything seems fine, but it still won't work. What are we missing?" As the others packed up to leave, Bob lingered behind. He had watched the team struggle all day, quietly observing their efforts while sweeping the floor nearby. Something about the way the engine sounded, or rather didn't sound, had caught his attention. Most people wouldn't have noticed it, but Bob had spent years listening to machines hum, whir, and sputter. To him, engines weren't just collections of pistons and gears. They were alive, speaking in subtle tones that revealed their secrets if you knew how to listen. That night, after everyone else had gone home, Bob decided to take matters into his own hands. He grabbed a flashlight and a toolbox, then walked over to the stubborn SUV. For a moment he stood there, staring at the hood as though trying to read its thoughts. Slowly he opened it and leaned in, examining the tangled mess of wires, hoses, and components. Using his fingers, he traced the connections, feeling for anything unusual. When he found nothing obvious, he pressed his ear against the engine block and turned the key in the ignition. A faint clicking sound echoed through the metal. To most people it would have meant nothing, but to Bob, it told a story. Over the next hour, Bob worked methodically. He tightened loose bolts, adjusted belts, and replaced a sensor that looked perfectly fine to the naked eye. At one point, he paused to wipe sweat from his forehead before diving back in. Finally, just as dawn began to break, he closed the hood and stepped back. With a deep breath, he turned the key once more. This time, the engine roared to life, smooth and steady. A satisfied smile spread across Bob's face. He gathered his tools, cleaned up the area, and slipped away before anyone arrived. When Jake walked into the garage the next morning, he froze in disbelief. The SUV was idling perfectly, its dashboard lights glowing softly. "What? How?" he stammered, rushing to inspect the engine. Everything looked normal, but somehow the car was fixed. Confused, he asked the rest of the team if any of them had stayed late to work on it. One by one, they shook their heads. It was then that Mia noticed something odd. The broom leaning against the wall was slightly out of place, and there was a fresh smear of grease on the handle. "Wait," she said slowly, turning to Jake. "Do you think—" Jake followed her gaze and frowned. "No way," he muttered. "There's no way he did this." But deep down, he couldn't ignore the possibility. Reluctantly, he approached Bob, who was busy sweeping near the entrance. Bob?" he began hesitantly. Did you happen to touch the SUV last night?" Bob stopped sweeping and looked up, his expression unreadable. After a brief pause, he nodded. "Yeah," he said simply. "It needed a little tweaking." The room fell silent. Everyone stared at Bob, stunned. Jake finally broke the silence. "How did you do it? We tried everything and nothing worked." Bob shrugged modestly. "Sometimes it's not about doing more," he replied. "It's about seeing what others miss." His words left the team speechless. For years, they had dismissed Bob as nothing more than a janitor, someone whose contributions were limited to keeping the shop clean. Now they realized they had underestimated him, and badly. Word of Bob's feat quickly spread throughout the shop. Customers who had witnessed the commotion started asking questions, and soon, everyone wanted to meet the mysterious janitor who could fix cars no one else could. Requests poured in, and Fix Fast became busier than ever. Cars that had been abandoned for months were brought in, their owners desperate for a miracle. Each time, Bob delivered, often solving problems in ways that baffled even the most experienced mechanics. Whether it was a tiny crack in a hose, a misaligned belt, or a faulty sensor hidden deep within the engine, Bob found the issue and fixed it with precision. Despite his growing fame, Bob remained humble. He continued to sweep the floors and clean up after repairs, refusing to let the attention go to his head. When customers thanked him, he simply smiled and said, "Just doing my job." To him, fixing cars wasn't about proving himself or earning praise. It was about helping people and making things right. Still, his presence transformed the shop. The once dismissive mechanics now treated him with respect, eager to learn from his unique approach to problem solving. Under his guidance, they began to see cars differently, not as machines to be repaired, but as puzzles waiting to be solved. As weeks turned into months, Bob's legend grew. Stories of his uncanny ability to diagnose and repair even the most baffling car troubles spread beyond Maple Ridge, drawing curious visitors from neighboring towns. Some came out of necessity, hoping he could save their beloved vehicles. Others came purely out of curiosity, wanting to witness the so-called miracle worker in action. Through it all, Bob remained unchanged. He didn't seek recognition or reward. He simply wanted to help. And in doing so, he reminded everyone at Fix Fast Mechanics and those who visited that sometimes the quietest voices carry the greatest wisdom. Though part 1 ends here, the story sets the stage for deeper exploration of Bob's past, his true motivations, and the impact he has on the people around him. Readers are left intrigued, wondering how such a humble man acquired his extraordinary skills and what other secrets he might be hiding. As weeks passed, Bob's reputation at Fix Fast Mechanics continued to grow. Customers now specifically requested him when bringing in their cars, and word of his mysterious talent spread far beyond Maple Ridge. People from neighboring towns drove for hours just to meet the quiet janitor who could fix anything. Some came out of desperation, others out of curiosity, but all left amazed by what he could do. Despite the attention, Bob remained humble, always deflecting praise and insisting that he was just doing his job. But as more impossible problems landed on his shoulders, the team, and even Jake, began to wonder, how did Bob know so much? And why had he kept it a secret for so long? One chilly autumn morning, a battered old pickup truck rumbled into the driveway of Fix Fast Mechanics. Its engine sputtered loudly, coughing clouds of black smoke as it came to a stop. Out stepped a wiry man with sunburnt skin and calloused hands. His name was Earl, and he introduced himself as a farmer from a nearby town. "This here's my workhorse," he said, patting the hood affectionately. "Without it, I can't get nothing done on the farm. Problem is, it won't run right no matter what I try." Earl explained that the truck had been acting up for months, slowly losing power until it barely moved at all. He'd taken it to several mechanics, but none had been able to pinpoint the issue. Desperate, he'd heard about Bob and decided to give Fix Fast one last shot. The team gathered around the truck, inspecting it with skeptical eyes. To them, it looked like any other worn-out vehicle, a rusted shell held together by duct tape and hope. Still, they rolled up their sleeves and got to work. Jake started by checking the fuel system, while Mia examined the electrical wiring. Tony focused on the transmission, muttering under his breath about how ancient the parts were. Hours passed, and frustration mounted. Every test they ran showed nothing wrong, yet the truck refused to cooperate. By late afternoon, they were ready to admit defeat. "I don't get it," Jake said, wiping grease off his hands. "Everything seems fine, but it still won't run properly." That evening, after everyone else had gone home, Bob approached the truck. He stood there for a moment, studying it silently. Then he opened the hood and leaned in, listening intently to the faint hum of the engine. Most people wouldn't have noticed anything unusual, but Bob's sharp ears detected a subtle irregularity, a slight hitch in the rhythm of the pistons. It was almost imperceptible, but to him, it was enough. Grabbing a flashlight and a toolbox, he began working methodically. First, he adjusted the carburetor, then tightened a few loose bolts. Next, he replaced a clogged air filter and cleaned out some debris from the intake manifold. Finally, he poured fresh oil into the engine, ensuring every component was properly lubricated. By midnight, Bob stepped back and turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, smooth and powerful. Satisfied, he closed the hood and swept up his tools before heading home. The next morning, when Earl returned to pick up his truck, he was astonished. "She runs like new," he exclaimed, grinning, ear to ear. "How'd you do it?" Jake hesitated, glancing toward the corner where Bob was sweeping the floor. "Let's just say we had some help," he replied, diplomatically. Earl nodded knowingly. "Well, whoever did it, tell him thanks. This truck means everything to me." Earl wasn't the only one grateful for Bob's skills. Over the next few weeks, more customers arrived with their own nightmare vehicles. There was a vintage motorcycle that hadn't started in years, a luxury sedan with unpredictable stalling issues, and even an old tractor that refused to budge. Each time, Bob quietly stepped in when the rest of the team hit a wall, fixing the problem with ease. His co-workers marveled at his ability to diagnose issues without relying on fancy equipment or following standard procedures. Instead, he seemed to trust his instincts, using a combination of observation, touch, and sound to guide him. It was as if he spoke the language of machines. Despite his growing fame, Bob remained reserved, rarely speaking unless spoken to. When asked about his methods, he offered vague answers like, "Sometimes it's not about what you see, it's about what you feel," or "Engines talk if you listen close enough." These cryptic responses only added to his mystique, leaving everyone wondering where he had learned such skills. Jake, in particular, became increasingly curious. One day, during a rare lull in the shop, he decided to confront Bob directly. "All right. Spill it," Jake said, leaning against a workbench. Where'd you learn to fix cars like that? You're not just some random janitor, are you? Bob paused mid-sweep and looked up, his expression unreadable. For a moment, he said nothing, as though weighing whether to share his secret. Finally, he sighed and set the broom aside. You really want to know? He asked quietly. Jake nodded eagerly. Yeah, I do. We've been working together for years, and suddenly you're this wizard with engines. What gives? Bob hesitated again, then gestured for Jake to follow him outside. They sat on a bench near the garage, surrounded by piles of tires and discarded car parts. Taking a deep breath, Bob began to speak. I grew up in a family of inventors and engineers, he explained. My dad worked on planes, my mom designed machines, and my uncle built race cars. From the time I was a kid, I was taught to think differently, to look at problems from angles most people don't consider. They trained me to trust my instincts and rely on practical solutions rather than textbooks. By the time I was 16, I could take apart and rebuild just about anything. Jake listened intently, his eyes wide with disbelief. So why'd you end up here? He asked. Why sweep floors instead of running your own shop or something? Bob chuckled softly. Because I don't need recognition, he replied. I never have. Back in the day, I used to work in big repair shops like this one, but I got tired of the politics, the competition, the pressure to prove myself, so I decided to step back, focus on what mattered, and let others take the credit. Being a janitor lets me stay behind the scenes helping without drawing attention. Plus, he trailed off, smiling faintly. Sweeping floors isn't such a bad gig. Jake shook his head in amazement. Man, I had no idea. You're like a genius hiding in plain sight. Bob shrugged modestly. I'm just a guy who likes solving problems. Doesn't matter if anyone notices or not. With that, he stood up and headed back inside, leaving Jake to process what he'd heard. Over the next few days, Jake shared Bob's story with the rest of the team. They were stunned, not just by his background, but by his humility. Mia, in particular, felt inspired. If someone like Bob can achieve so much without needing recognition, imagine what we could accomplish if we adopted that mindset, she said thoughtfully. Slowly but surely, the team began to change. They started approaching repairs with renewed creativity, experimenting with unconventional methods, and learning to trust their instincts. Even Tony, who had always prided himself on sticking to tradition, found himself embracing new ideas. Meanwhile, business at Fix Fast boomed. Customers lined up outside the shop, eager to have their vehicles repaired by the legendary janitor. Some brought gifts, homemade pies, bottles of wine, even cash tips, but Bob politely declined them all. I don't need anything extra, he told one grateful customer, just happy to help. His selflessness earned him even more admiration, both from clients and his co-workers. For the first time since starting at Fix Fast, Bob felt truly valued, not for his skills but for who he was. But not everyone was pleased with Bob's rise to prominence. Across town there was another auto repair shop called Speed Fix Motors. Owned by a brash businessman named Victor Kane, it had long been Fix Fast's biggest rival. Victor prided himself on having the best mechanics in the region, and he hated seeing his competitors succeed. When he heard about Bob and the miracles happening at Fix Fast, he grew furious. A janitor fixing cars better than my top guys? That's ridiculous, he snapped during a staff meeting. Determined to put an end to the madness, he hatched a plan to expose Bob as a fraud, or worse, steal him away for himself. Victor sent two of his best mechanics to Fix Fast under the guise of seeking repairs for a high-end sports car. Their real mission, however, was to observe Bob and gather intel. They watched closely as Bob diagnosed and fixed the car's complex engine issue in record time. Impressed despite themselves, they reported back to Victor. He's legit, one of them admitted reluctantly. I've never seen anyone work like that. Victor scowled. Fine, he muttered. If we can't discredit him, we'll hire him. Offer him double whatever Fix Fast pays. No one says no to money like that. The next day, Victor showed up at Fix Fast personally. Dressed in an expensive suit and oozing confidence, he marched straight up to Bob. "Listen, pal," he began, flashing a toothy grin. "I hear you're the best mechanic around. How'd you like to come work for me? Name your price. I'll make it worth your while." Bob blinked in surprise, then shook his head firmly. "Thanks, but no thanks," he replied. "I'm happy where I am." Victor frowned, clearly unaccustomed to rejection. "You sure about that? Think about it. Better pay, better tools, better everything. You'd be a fool to turn this down." Bob smiled kindly but resolutely. "Money doesn't mean much to me," he said. "What matters is doing good work and helping people. And I already have that here." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving V. Victor Kane stormed out of Fix Fast Mechanics, his face red with anger. He couldn't believe that Bob, a janitor of all people, had turned down his offer. No one rejected Victor Kane, especially not when he dangled money and prestige in front of them. As he climbed into his sleek black sports car, he muttered under his breath, "Fine. If you won't come willingly, I'll make sure you regret staying there." With a screech of tires, he sped off, already plotting his next move. Little did he know his actions would set off a chain of events that would test everyone at Fix Fast and reveal just how far Bob was willing to go to protect what mattered most. Back at Speedfix Motors, Victor called an emergency meeting with his team. The garage buzzed with activity as mechanics worked on high-end vehicles, but Victor's voice cut through the noise like a knife. "All right, listen up," he barked, slamming his fist on a table. "That little shop across town is stealing our customers. And it's all because of one guy, a nobody janitor who thinks he's some kind of genius. We need to shut them down. Permanently." His employees exchanged uneasy glances. They knew Victor wasn't someone to cross, but sabotaging another business? That felt extreme even for him. "What exactly do you want us to do?" asked one of his senior mechanics cautiously. Victor smirked. "Simple. Spread rumors. Say their work is shoddy, that they use cheap parts, whatever it takes to scare people away. Then, once they're desperate, we swoop in and take over their customers, or better yet, buy them out." The room fell silent as the plan sank in. It was dirty, unethical, and downright cruel. But no one dared argue with Victor. Instead, they nodded obediently and got to work. Over the next few weeks, whispers began spreading around Maple Ridge. People claimed Fix Fast Mechanics had botched repairs, leaving cars worse than before. Others said the shop used counterfeit, parts that would fail within months. Some even accused Bob of being a fraud, suggesting his success was due to luck rather than skill. At first, Jake and the team dismissed the rumors as nonsense. After all, their reputation had been built on honesty and hard work. But as more customers started canceling appointments or choosing Speedfix instead, they realized something was seriously wrong. One afternoon, Mia confronted Jake about the situation. "We can't ignore this anymore," she said firmly. "These rumors are hurting us and Bob too. If we don't fight back, we might lose everything." Jake sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. "I know," he admitted. "But what can we do? We can't prove Victor's behind this, and without evidence, no one will believe us." Just then, Bob walked by, broom in hand. Hearing their conversation, he paused and looked at them thoughtfully. "Maybe we don't need proof," he said quietly. "Maybe we just need to show people the truth." The team stared at him, confused. "What do you mean?" Jake asked. Bob smiled faintly. "Let's throw a community event. Invite everyone to see how we work, meet the team, and learn why we're different from other shops. Sometimes showing is better than telling." The EOA idea was risky. What if people didn't show up? But it was also brilliant. If they could win back trust by opening their doors, maybe they could turn things around. Without hesitation, the team agreed to give it a shot. They spent the next week preparing for the event. Flyers were printed and distributed throughout town, inviting residents to visit Fix Fast Mechanics for free demonstrations, refreshments, and live repairs. On the day of the event, the garage transformed into a bustling hub of activity. Cars, lined the driveway, and crowds gathered to watch as Jake, Mia, and Tony showcased their skills. Bob, meanwhile, stayed in the background, sweeping floors and chatting casually with visitors. Despite his modest demeanor, many people recognized him and eagerly sought him out, asking questions about his techniques and thanking him for past repairs. At one point, a young man named Alex approached Bob with a broken-down motorcycle. "Can you fix this?" he asked hopefully. "It's my only way to get to work, and I've been stuck for weeks." Bob nodded and gestured for him to bring it inside. Within minutes, he had diagnosed the issue, a clogged fuel line. Using basic tools, he cleared the blockage and adjusted the carburetor. When he turned the key, the engine roared to life. Cheers erupted from the crowd, and Alex beamed with gratitude. "You're amazing," he said, shaking Bob's hand. "Thank you so much." Moments like these happened throughout the day, each one reinforcing FixFast's reputation as a trustworthy and skilled repair shop. By evening, the team felt a renewed sense of hope. Customers who had doubted them after hearing the rumors now apologized and promised to spread the word about their positive experiences. Even Earl, the farmer whose pickup truck Bob had fixed earlier, returned to express his support. "Don't let those lies get to you," he told Jake. "Folks around here know quality when they see it." But while the event was a success, Victor Kane wasn't ready to give up. Furious that his smear campaign hadn't destroyed FixFast, he decided to escalate his tactics. Late that night, after the celebrations had ended and the team had gone home, a group of masked men snuck into the garage. Armed with crowbars and hammers, they wreaked havoc, smashing windows, slashing tires, and damaging equipment. By the time they left, the shop was in ruins. The next morning, Jake arrived to find the devastation. Broken glass littered the floor, tools lay scattered everywhere, and several cars awaiting repair had been vandalized. Shock quickly turned to rage as he pieced together what had happened. "This has Victor's name all over it," he growled, clenching his fists. When the rest of the team arrived, they shared his fury, but none were angrier than Bob. For the first time since joining FixFast, he allowed his emotions to show. His jaw tightened, and his normally calm eyes burned with determination. "We can't let him win," he said firmly. "If we do, he'll keep pushing until there's nothing left." Determined to rebuild, the team sprang into action. Neighbors who had attended the community event rallied to help, donating supplies and volunteering their time. Local businesses offered discounts on materials, and even Earl showed up with a trailer full of spare parts. Slowly but surely, the garage came back to life. Bob played a crucial role in the recovery effort, using his resourcefulness to salvage damaged tools and repurpose old components. His leadership inspired everyone to work harder, turning what could have been a disaster into an opportunity to strengthen their bond. As the days passed, FixFast became stronger than ever. The vandalism had united the community, proving that Victor's attempts to divide them had backfired spectacularly. But Bob knew they couldn't stop there. If they wanted to ensure their future, they needed to confront Victor directly. One evening, after closing up the shop, he pulled Jake aside. "We need to expose him," Bob said bluntly. "Not just for what he did to us, but for everything else he's done to stay on top." Jake hesitated. "How? We still don't have proof." Bob smiled knowingly. "Leave that to me. I've been thinking about this for a while, and I think I know how to catch him in the act." Intrigued, Jake pressed him for details, but Bob simply shook his head. "Trust me," he said. "Just be ready when the time comes." The following week, Bob put his plan into motion. Posing as a disgruntled customer, he visited Speedfix Motors and complained loudly about FixFast, claiming they had ruined his car and demanding compensation. Victor, eager to exploit the situation, invited Bob to join him in a secret meeting where they could discuss taking legal action against FixFast. Unbeknownst to Victor, Bob recorded the entire conversation, capturing damning evidence of Victor's schemes to sabotage competitors. Armed with the recording, Bob and the team presented their case to local authorities. Within days, Victor's illegal activities were exposed and Speedfix Motors was shut down pending investigation. Humiliated and defeated, Victor fled town, leaving behind a trail of lawsuits and angry customers. Meanwhile, FixFast emerged victorious, its reputation stronger than ever. Though Part 3 ends here, the story sets the stage for deeper exploration of Bob's character and the lasting impact of his actions. Readers are left wondering how Bob's journey will continue and whether he'll finally step fully into the spotlight or remain content in the shadows. Victor Kane's downfall sent shockwaves through Maple Ridge. The once feared owner of Speedfix Motors was now a disgraced figure, his name synonymous with greed and deceit. News of his schemes spread like wildfire, and soon, FixFast Mechanics became the talk of the town, not just for their skill but for exposing corruption. Customers flooded back to the shop, eager to support the team that had stood up against injustice. But amidst the celebration, Bob remained quiet, as usual. While others basked in the victory, he seemed content to return to his routine, sweeping floors and fixing cars without fanfare. Jake noticed Bob's subdued demeanor and couldn't help but feel curious. "You know," he said one morning, leaning against a workbench, "you're the real hero here. If it weren't for you, we'd still be dealing with Victor's nonsense." Bob paused mid-sweep and looked up, his expression calm but unreadable. "It wasn't about being a hero," he replied simply. "It was about doing what was right." Jake shook his head in disbelief. "Still, most people would have wanted recognition after pulling off something like that. You didn't even ask for credit." Bob chuckled softly. "Recognition doesn't change anything," he said. "What matters is how we treat each other and the work we do. Besides," Io trailed off, glancing around the bustling garage, "this place feels like home now. That's enough for me." His words struck a chord with Jake, who realized just how much Bob valued simplicity and humility. For someone so extraordinary, Bob's greatest strength lay in his ability to remain grounded, a quality that inspired everyone around him. As life at FixFast returned to normal, the team found themselves growing closer than ever. They began collaborating more openly, sharing ideas and learning from one another. Mia, in particular, sought out Bob frequently, asking questions about his techniques and philosophy. "How do you stay so calm under pressure?" she asked one day while they worked on a tricky engine problem together. Bob smiled faintly. "Pressure comes from worrying about things you can't control," he explained. "If you focus on solving the problem instead of stressing about it, everything becomes easier." Mia nodded thoughtfully, realizing how much she could learn from him, not just about cars but about life itself. Meanwhile, the community's appreciation for FixFast continued to grow. People brought gifts, wrote thank you notes, and recommended the shop to friends and family. One customer, an elderly woman named Mrs. Thompson, went so far as to bake a cake every week for the team. "I don't know much about cars," she admitted during one visit, "but I know good people when I see them, and you all are the best." Her kindness touched everyone, especially Bob, who often stayed behind to chat with her during deliveries. But not everything was smooth sailing. Despite their success, challenges still arose, some technical, others personal. One afternoon, a young man named Danny rushed into the shop, panic etched across his face. "Please, you have to help me," he pleaded. "My dad's truck broke, down halfway to the hospital, and he needs dialysis treatments tomorrow. Without it—" His voice cracked, unable to finish the sentence. The team immediately sprang into action, loading tools into a van and heading to the scene. When they arrived, they found the truck parked on the side of a deserted road, its engine dead. Jake and Mia began inspecting it while Tony checked the tires and suspension. Bob, however, took a different approach. He walked around the vehicle, examining it from every angle before finally opening the hood. After a few moments of listening intently, he frowned. "This isn't just mechanical failure," he said quietly. "Someone tampered with it." The team froze, exchanging worried glances. "Are you sure?" Jake asked. Bob nodded grimly. "See these marks? Someone loosened key components to make it fail." The realization hit them hard. Even though Victor was gone, his toxic influence lingered. Someone, perhaps one of his former employees, had tried to sabotage the truck out of spite. Determined to help, the team worked tirelessly to repair the damage. By midnight, the truck was running smoothly again, and Danny hugged each of them tearfully. "Thank you," he whispered. "You saved my dad's life." As they drove back to the shop, exhausted but satisfied, Bob reflected on the incident. Evil might never truly disappear, but neither would the goodness that countered it. Back at Fix Fast, the team decided to take proactive measures to prevent future sabotage attempts. They installed security cameras around the property and encouraged customers to report suspicious activity. Bob also suggested implementing a mentorship program, teaching young mechanics ethical practices and fostering a culture of honesty and integrity. The idea quickly gained traction, and within weeks several apprentices joined the team, eager to learn from the best. Among the newcomers was a shy teenager named Lily. She had always been fascinated by cars but lacked confidence in her abilities. When she first arrived at Fix Fast, she barely spoke, intimidated by the skilled mechanics around her. But Bob saw potential in her and took her under his wing. "Don't worry about making mistakes," he told her gently. "Every great mechanic started somewhere. Just keep trying and you'll get there." Under his guidance, Lily blossomed, surprising even herself with her progress. Soon, she was assisting on complex repairs and earning praise from customers. As months passed, Fix Fast evolved into more than just a repair shop. It became a cornerstone of the community. Families gathered for barbecues in the parking lot. Local artists painted murals on the walls, and schools organized field trips to teach students about engineering and teamwork. Through it all, Bob remained the heart of the operation, quietly, guiding everyone with wisdom and patience. Yet despite his central role, he never sought attention or accolades. To him, true fulfillment came from seeing others succeed. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light over the garage, Jake approached Bob with a thoughtful expression. "You've done so much for this place and for all of us," he began. "But I can't help wondering, and what's next for you? Do you ever think about leaving, starting your own shop maybe?" Bob paused, leaning on his broom as he considered the question. "Honestly," he said after a moment, "no, this is where I belong. Fix Fast isn't just a job, it's a family, and families stick together." His answer filled Jake with gratitude and a newfound determination to honor Bob's legacy. Inspired by his example, the team vowed to carry forward the values he embodied: humility, integrity, and a relentless commitment to helping others. They knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they could overcome them as long as they stayed united. But even as peace settled over Fix Fast, whispers of change began to stir. Across the country, rumors circulated about advancements in automotive technology, self-driving cars, electric engines, and AI diagnostics. Some predicted these innovations would render traditional mechanics obsolete. Others argued that skilled hands and sharp minds would always be essential. Whatever the future held, one thing was certain: Fix Fast Mechanics, led by Bob's quiet brilliance, would adapt and thrive. Though Part 4 ends here, the stage is set for the final chapter of Bob's journey. Readers are left wondering how Fix Fast will navigate the shifting landscape of the automotive world, and whether Bob will finally step fully into the spotlight as the visionary leader he has always been. As the years rolled on, Fix Fast Mechanics continued to thrive, becoming a symbol of resilience and innovation in Maple Ridge. The shop had weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical, and emerged stronger each time. Bob, the quiet janitor, who had once been overlooked, was now the heart and soul of the operation. His influence extended far beyond fixing cars. He inspired everyone around him to embrace creativity, humility, and teamwork. Yet, as the world outside evolved rapidly, so too did the automotive industry. Electric vehicles, self-driving technology, and AI-driven diagnostics began dominating headlines, signaling a seismic shift that no one could ignore. At first, but changes seemed distant, almost irrelevant to Fix Fast. Most of their customers still drove gasoline-powered cars, and traditional repairs remained in high demand. But slowly, Newer models started appearing in the driveway. Sleek hybrids and fully electric sedans with sleek designs and futuristic features. Jake noticed the trend early on and brought it up during a team meeting. "We can't keep ignoring this," he said, gesturing to a Tesla parked nearby. "If we want to stay relevant, we need to adapt. That means learning how to work on these new systems." The team exchanged uneasy glances. For mechanics who had spent decades mastering internal combustion engines, the idea of switching to electric motors felt daunting. Mia voiced what many were thinking. "It's not just about learning new skills, it's about completely changing the way we think. These cars don't even have half the parts we're used to working with." Tony nodded grimly. "And what happens if something goes wrong? We can't just tinker with wires like we used to. One mistake could fry the whole system." Bob listened quietly, his expression thoughtful. When the discussion lulled, he spoke up. "Change isn't easy," he admitted. "But it's also an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to stay ahead of the curve. Remember, cars are still machines. They might look different, but they still speak the same language, if you listen carefully." His words reassured the YAG team, reminding them that their core skills weren't obsolete. What mattered most was their ability to adapt and solve problems creatively. With Bob's encouragement, Fix Fast embarked on a journey of transformation. They invested in training, programs, attending workshops and seminars to learn about hybrid and electric vehicle technologies. At first, progress was slow. The team struggled to wrap their heads around complex software systems and delicate circuitry. But Bob's calm demeanor and patient guidance kept them motivated. He reminded them that every challenge was a puzzle, waiting to be solved, and that persistence would always pay off. One day, a nervous young woman named Sarah arrived at the shop, towing a state-of-the-art electric SUV behind her. "I'm so sorry to bother you," she said apologetically. "I know you mostly handle regular cars, but I didn't know where else to go. My car won't charge, and I've got a big presentation tomorrow morning. If I miss it..." Her voice trailed off, tears welling up in her eyes. Jake glanced at the team, unsure whether they were ready to tackle such a complicated issue. Before anyone could respond, Bob stepped forward. "Don't worry," he said gently. "We'll figure it out." For hours, the team worked tirelessly, consulting manuals and troubleshooting guides while Bob supervised. Unlike the others, Bob approached the problem methodically, using logic and intuition rather than relying solely on instructions. After dismantling part of the charging port, he discovered a tiny burned-out fuse hidden deep within the system. Replacing it restored power to the vehicle, and soon, the SUV hummed back to life. Sarah hugged each of them tearfully, thanking them profusely. "You saved me," she said. "I'll tell everyone I know about you guys." Word of Fix Fast's success with electric vehicles spread quickly. More customers began bringing in hybrids and EVs, confident that the team could handle even the most advanced systems. Over time, Fix Fast established itself as a leader in cutting-edge automotive repair, blending old-school craftsmanship with modern expertise. Bob's role became more prominent than ever, not because he sought recognition, but because his unique perspective bridged the gap between tradition and innovation. Despite their achievements, Bob remained humble, continuing to sweep floors and assist with repairs without fanfare. To him, titles and accolades meant little. What mattered was making a difference. Still, the team couldn't help but feel that Bob deserved more credit for everything he had done. One evening, after closing up the shop, Jake pulled him aside. "Listen, Bob," he began earnestly. "You've given us so much, your knowledge, your wisdom, your leadership, and yet you've never asked for anything in return. Don't you ever want more?" Bob smiled faintly, leaning on his broom. "More of what?" he asked. "Money? Fame? Those things don't define me. What I care about is seeing people succeed, not just here, but everywhere. If I can help someone fix a car or solve a problem, then my job is done." Jake shook his head in admiration. "You're incredible, you know that? Most people would have taken all the glory by now. But you You just keep giving." His words resonated deeply with the rest of the team. Inspired by Bob's selflessness, they decided to honor him in their own way. During a community event celebrating FixFast's 10th anniversary, Jake stood before a crowd of friends, family, and loyal customers. Holding up a plaque engraved with Bob's name, he announced, "This award represents everything Bob has done for us, for this shop, for our town, and for the countless lives he's touched. He may not seek recognition, but we owe it to him to acknowledge his greatness." So today, we officially rename our mentorship program the Bob Initiative. It's a reminder that kindness, humility, and hard work will always lead to success. The crowd erupted into applause, cheering loudly as Bob accepted the plaque with a shy smile. For once, he allowed himself to bask in the moment, grateful for the love and respect surrounding him. As fireworks lit up the night sky, marking the end of the celebration, Bob reflected on how far they had come. From a struggling auto shop to a beacon of hope and innovation, FixFast had grown in ways he never imagined. And through it all, he had stayed true to himself, proving that greatness often lies in the simplest acts of service. In the years that followed, FixFast Mechanics became a model for other shops across the country. Their blend of traditional values and modern techniques attracted attention from industry leaders who praised their ability to adapt without losing sight of what truly mattered. Bob's influence reached far beyond Maple Ridge, inspiring a new generation of mechanics to embrace curiosity, collaboration, and integrity. Even as younger apprentices took over day-to-day operations, Bob remained a guiding presence, offering advice and encouragement whenever needed. Eventually, age caught up with Bob, and he decided it was time to step back from full-time work. On his last day, the entire team gathered to say goodbye. There were hugs, laughter, and a few tears as they shared memories of their time together. Jake handed Bob a small gift, a framed photo of the team standing proudly in front of the garage. "You built this place," he said sincerely. "Not just the building, but the spirit inside it. Thank you for everything." Bob accepted the gift with a warm smile. "I didn't build anything," he replied modestly. "All I did was help. Plant seeds. You're the ones who made them grow." With that, he picked up his broom one final time and swept the floor, leaving it spotless as always. Then, with a wave, he walked out the door, disappearing into the sunset. Though Bob was no longer physically present, his legacy lived on. FixFast Mechanics continued to flourish, embodying the principles he had instilled: humility, perseverance, and a commitment to helping others. Customers still talked about the legendary janitor who could fix anything, and aspiring mechanics dreamed of following in his footsteps. In a world that often celebrated noise and spectacle, Bob had proven that sometimes the quietest voices leave the loudest echoes. And so the story of Bob, the man who started as a joke and ended as a hero, came to a close. But his impact endured, a testament to the power of kindness, wisdom, and unwavering dedication. For everyone at FixFast Mechanics, Bob wasn't just a janitor or a mechanic. He was a teacher, a friend, and above all, a reminder that true greatness lies not in seeking glory, but in lifting others up.